Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on It's Time for Sunday School. Are you ready for another day of, well, let's try this day. Are you ready for a day that you can learn a little bit about Christ and trust? And we trust that this is what this is all about. Let's see if this is any better. No, I don't guess so. We need a little light on the subject, don't we? We want to discuss today a topic that I sometimes ministers get into ruts. We do. We get in ruts. Now, the ruts are sometimes spirit led, and sometimes they're just our own thing. We fight. It's just leveling with you. And ruts are meaning they harp on the same thing continuously. It's harp, 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 harp. Now, sometimes people, ministers, harp on the very things that they struggle with. You know, I remember the old days harped on cigarette smoking. Why? Because they struggled with cigarette smoking or drinking or pornography. And that's not always the case by a long shot. But then there's the good harping that still can be hard. Uh, Ministry. I go through a situation from time to time on ministry. I think that, let me turn Gerald down just a little bit. I think that everyone should minister. Now, minister is different. Ministry could be cleaning the church. Ministry could be teaching Sunday school class. Ministry could be helping the needy. Ministry. And I struggle with harping on ministry. I know my youth pastor, he struggles with harping on heaven or hell. Heaven, yes, or hell, no, you know. But today I want to talk to you about something that is dear to all Christians, okay? And that's showing up for work. Showing up for work. Now, when I grew up, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She got up to cook our breakfast just about every morning. She, excuse me, she cleaned the house. She took care of because Dad was traveling most of the time, and then he pastored some of the time. She was a stay-at-home mom. Now, after we got out of school, she was no longer a stay-at-home mom. She worked. Um, but most of us have to have had a job in our life. We work. Some people work in factories. Some people work outside. Some people work in a computer. Okay, we work. But we have to do something in order to make an income unless somebody's left you a lot of money, right? So what do you do at work? What you're expected to do. What you're expected to do. So join with me in this simple thing. Let me see if I can get this for you. We're going to do what is our reasonable service. Now, give me a second here. It's been a while since I've done this. So we're going to try. Okay. Let's see if I did it here. This is Paul's writing to the church at Rome. I'll move me around here so you can still see my lovely face. And this is some hard writing. This is, Romans chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. And he says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren and sisters, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God. Here's the part, which is your reasonable service. Doing what he said, presenting our bodies as a sacrifice and holy and acceptable is strictly a reasonable service. You're not doing anything flashy. You're not trying to get any brownie points. You're not arriving to work early 3 hours and staying late 3 hours. You're not doing things that are just off the cuff. I'll work the weekends for you, boss, so the plant can continue to. No, it's whatever is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that we may prove what is that good, here we go, and acceptable and perfect will of God. Now, those three things are just, man, you could have fun with those. See, everybody thinks that everything with God is the perfect No, there it is right there. Perfect, right there. What is that good? What is acceptable? And then the perfect will of God. Now, a perfect, well, an illustration, I don't know how perfect it is. An illustration of that is somebody comes and, Steve, I would like a drink, soft drink. Okay. That's a will of that individual. What do you want? Well, I really like Sprite. Hey, guy, I don't have any Sprite, but I got 7-Up. That's acceptable. I'll be happy to take the acceptable 7-Up. See, now the perfect will is the Sprite, but you don't have the Sprite. You've got the 7-Up. And flip it now. That's the acceptable. So what's the acceptable? Whatever is that Christ or God, however you want to, to word that, thinks it's okay. Some people, Paul said, he says, some people can eat meat, some people can't. Some person, they can't accept it. Some people, they can't accept it. To them, it's just flesh that was offered to idols. But he also went so far as to say, now, if somebody says to you, this meat was offered to idols, what? Don't eat it. Could be a test. Could be that they need you to know that, so that whether or not you would eat it or not, you may have you may have a problem with it. A lot of the early church had problems with meat that was offered to idols. In fact, the early church said, don't do it. Paul said later on, he said, I know it's a piece of meat, but not everybody can live like it. For I say that through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think. Too many times people think that we're, oh yeah, special. Thank you, you little people. I play a horrible game of golf, and every now and then I make a good shot. Every now and then, maybe once a week, and I will invariably go, "Thank you, you little people." Why? Because they know I don't make very good shots. Not to think of themselves more highly than they ought to, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith. This is a magnificent 3 verses that, if we could live our life by this, the reasonable service is the part that I always thought was interesting. Yeah. What is the reasonable service? You show up for work. Well, I do know people that show up for work that don't do a whole lot of work. Now, if they're not union, they generally don't last very long, do they? Union people have the deal, but even the other union guys will go to the shop steward and say that he's not right. He may be union, but that's not ethical. He makes the rest of us look bad. And they bring the guy in and say, hey, we don't do that, do we? If it's a good union. Now, if you show up for work and you don't do anything, how long is that job going to last? There we go, back to the ministry part, right, Steve? Yeah. What is my reasonable service? Ask yourself, what is my reasonable service? Steve, I go to church. That's wonderful. That's part of your reasonable service. I do believe emphatically that's part of your reasonable service. I pay my offerings to God. Well, the word teaches us that. I think that's part of your reasonable service too. Now let's look at it this way. Are you a parent? What is your reasonable service as a parent? And let's flip it. You may not be required to be a Billy Graham. You may not be required to be a Sunday school teacher, but ask God, Father, what kind of service do I need to present myself to you? And with this, I close. Years ago, I was taking care of a children's church. And in the children's church, they ran across a situation where they needed somebody to help the boys on Wednesday night. Well, it ended up, through whatever situation was, I was the guy that needed to take care of the Wednesday night young men's part, boys. I think 7 to 13. 13, they moved to the youth department. And it got to where I didn't have any help. So pastor made a plea, and this guy came in and he told the pastor, I'll just do anything for the church, anything for God. That's me. I'll just do anything. So pastor said to him, well, Steve, I know needs some help on Wednesday night. So he shows up on Wednesday night to see what's going on. Well, he sees these kids and a lot of street kids, and we have a certain format, but they stink. Some of them don't have shoes on. It's Florida. Some of them look bad, you know. Some of them are rough around the collar. So afterwards, I come to him and I say, hey, thank you for helping. He said, yes, my brother, I need to pray about this situation. I said, don't bother praying. He said, excuse me? I said, don't bother praying. You're the one that said you'd do anything for God, right? Well, yes. I said, you see the need, right? Yeah. I said, don't bother praying. If you see the need and you don't respond to the need, what do you think God wants you to do? He didn't show up anymore. He didn't show up anymore to the church. Why? You see, he wanted to be a pastor. He wanted to be a teacher of, you don't understand what I'm saying. To be faithful, God sometimes he starts you off on the small side just to see if you'll be faithful. You know what? Sometimes you develop a love for doing the small things. You develop a passion for doing the small things. That's your cup of tea. And then next thing you know it, God's got you doing larger things. And yet you still don't lose your desire to do the passions, the small things. Weird. Yeah, whatever's your reasonable service. Show up for work today. Let God show you. He'll teach you what he wants you to do. Just don't be lazy. Okay? That's it for today. May God bless you and your family. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.